On April 30th, 2016, Dak Prescott was taken in the 4th round, pick 135 overall, by the Dallas Cowboys. At the time, Tony Romo was still the Cowboys starting quarterback and had been the starting quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys for the past 10 years. However, throughout those 10 years, there was an issue that had been actively plaguing Romo, and by extension, plaguing the Cowboys. You see, Romo had a well-documented history of injuries, and this history was only expanded upon the season prior. It really came as no surprise to anyone when Romo went down with a fractured collarbone in Week 4 of the 2015 season. And over the span of the next 3 weeks, the Cowboys would have to resort to Brandon Weeden, who would unsurprisingly go 0-3. But that's okay, because in Week 7, the Cowboys traded for Matt Castle, who then proceeded to go 0-4. For the Cowboys. But luckily, Romo was fully recovered by Week 11, and at 2-7, the Cowboys were still in the hunt for the playoffs. If Romo and the Cowboys can piece together 7 wins, they play for a wild card. And look, they were able to handle the Dolphins and improve to 3-7. Only 6 wins to go, and you're in the playoffs. If only Romo didn't go down with a broken left collarbone again in Week 12 against the Panthers. And yes, this time around, a broken collarbone would end Romo's 2015 season, along with the Cowboys' hopes and dreams, as they'd coast to a 4-12 record, the worst record in the NFC East. And man, 2015 was just the most Romo-like year of Romo's entire career. He only started 4 games, and that's worse than Romo's 2010 campaign, where he would only play 6 games, coincidentally, due to a broken left collarbone. That all said, although Romo was set to return in 2016, the Cowboys were in a desperate need of a better backup plan, just in case Romo were to be taken out with injury again. Brandon Weeden and Matt Castle had proved to just not be cutting it for America's team, which is why Dak Prescott heard his name called in the 4th round. Heading into 2016, the Cowboys were looking to turn things around now that they had Romo back. However, Romo would, of course, go down with injury in 2016, and while the Cowboys expected this to happen and drafted Dak Prescott in the case that it did happen, I seriously doubt they expected him to go down in Week 1 of the preseason. And just like that, the rest was history. Dak Prescott went on to win the starting job of the Dallas Cowboys, leading the Cowboys to a 13-3 record. Romo would retire and become the GOAT of broadcasting, and although the Cowboys would not win a single playoff game that year, exiting to the Packers in the divisional round of the 2016 playoffs, Dak's rookie season would go down as one of the best amongst quarterbacks in NFL history. It looked as if the Cowboys were primed to become a perennial playoff contender with the best quarterback-running back tandem in the league in Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott, both of which on cheap rookie contracts, which allowed for Jerry to bolster up the other parts of the team. It looked as if the Cowboys were completely set, but in a surprising turn of events, the Cowboys would go 9-7 in 2017 to follow up their 13-3 campaign, missing the playoffs and having what was overall an incredibly lackluster year. And that mediocrity did not spare Dak, as Dak's production saw a serious dip in every measurable statistic possible. Well, aside from interceptions, which more than tripled from the previous year. Now, the Cowboys would make it back to the playoffs the very next year, going 10-6, and would eke out a victory at home against the beaten and battered Seattle Seahawks, winning the game 24-22. They'd then go on to receive a beating from the Rams the very next week, who eventually went on to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl and to only score 3 points. But it looked like the Cowboys had gotten over their hump from the previous year. Heading into 2019, coming off of a playoff berth and his first playoff win, Dak decided he had done enough to approach Jerry Jones and talk about a possible long-term deal. And immediately in response to this, Jerry offered Dak a $30 million a year contract up front, which Dak then turned down, instead demanding to be the highest paid quarterback in NFL history with $40 million annually. In Jerry's eyes, Dak wasn't worth that $40 million a year contract that he wanted. So Dak went ahead, turned down the $30 million a year contract, and placed a bet on himself, setting out to use the 2019 season to prove Jerry wrong. But he'd failed to prove Jerry wrong. The Cowboys would spend 2019 trying to hand the Eagles the division, while the Eagles simultaneously tried to hand them the division. It was really weird. In the end, the Cowboys didn't want the division a little bit more than the Eagles didn't want it, so they'd miss the playoffs, going 8-8, the worst record of Dak's 4-year career. After starting off hot, winning their first 3 games against the Giants, Redskins, and Dolphins, the Cowboys would lose their next 3 to the Saints, Packers, and the Jets. Dak would fold under pressure and play down to his competition on numerous different instances, and in their 8-8 run, they would lose to the Vikings, Patriots, Bills, Bears, and Eagles. And throughout Dak's 2019 campaign, the best team the Cowboys were able to beat, the only playoff team they were able to beat, was the Eagles, who, let's be honest, was hardly a playoff team. And to add insult to injury, the Rams and the Eagles were the only teams over 500 that the Cowboys beat in 2019. And it's safe to say that with the season he just had, Dak has absolutely no leverage this offseason and will most likely not be seeing that $40 million a year contract. It's likely that 2020 will turn into Dak's make it or break it kind of year, as he will most likely end up getting franchise tagged by the Cowboys. And if I'm being entirely honest, this is the right move for the Cowboys. Dak, quite frankly, doesn't deserve a new contract after the season he just had. And then you add this onto the fact that the Cowboys just brought in Mike McCarthy in lieu of Jason Garrett and have no clue how well him and Dak will mesh. A franchise tag is really the only option the Cowboys should even consider right now when it comes to Dak. Over the years, I've noticed that there's been a trend of unproven quarterbacks getting huge long-term contracts. Like contracts that reset the entire quarterback market. Two prime examples of this are Nick Foles and Kirk Cousins. Now, Foles agreed to a 4-year, $88 million contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they paid him to be the full-time starter, 16 games a year type money, despite the fact that he's never started a full 16-game season in his 8-year career. Now, Foles does have a Super Bowl on his resume. We can't discount that. But again, they signed him to do something that he's never done before, and they gave him huge amounts of money to do this. And unsurprisingly, the Jaguars are now shopping Foles after an injury-riddled season where, in the games he started, he went 0-4. Part of the reason why they're attempting to get rid of Foles does have to do with Gardner Minshew, who did burst onto the scene almost out of nowhere last year and without a shadow of a doubt earned the starting job over Foles in Jacksonville. But still, $88 million over 4 years to a guy who had never started a full 16-game season. He was unproven. Then we have Kirk Cousins, who signed with the Vikings in 2018, signing a 3-year, $84 million contract. Now, the Vikings felt as if, after losing to the Eagles in the NFC Championship, that they were an upgrade at quarterback away from making a Super Bowl run and competing for a Lombardi. So, they brought Kirk Cousins in from free agency, despite the fact that Kirk had never won a playoff game before signing with the Vikings and had a history of folding under pressure, which unsurprisingly, carried over to the Vikings. Now, up until this point, he has not produced the results that they've hoped for. And who could blame him? The results they were looking for from Kirk Cousins were completely wild based off of what he had done prior to joining the Vikings. My point is, Dak has had flashes, as have Foles and Cousins. That doesn't mean that you should break the bank and give him the biggest contract in NFL history. With the current quarterback market in mind, where guys like Kirk Cousins and Nick Foles currently make around $30 million a year, I think it would have been wise for Dak to take the $30 million back in 2019 when it was offered to him. I'd argue that Dak and Kirk Cousins are on a very similar level. And look, you may freak out, but statistically, their performance has been incredibly similar, barring Dak's rookie year, which was simply uncanny and looks to be more of an outlier at this point than anything else. Let me ask you a question here. Would you rather have job security for the next 5 years and be one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL, or have absolutely no job security and be on the hottest of hot seats while making the same amount annually that you would have made under a long-term safe deal with job security? Because if Dak is franchise tagged, he's going to make $30 million in 2020, which is the exact same amount of money that he'd be making under the contract he was offered by Jerry Jones in the 2019 offseason. Again, though, in this case, he has no job security whatsoever. Dak Prescott overestimated his value, and he'll quite possibly pay a very hefty price for it. What happened here is very simple. We have a player who decided to place a bet on himself, and he lost that bet to the house. Now, something I find really concerning about Dak is the fact that his rookie year was his best year so far. And the fact is that since Dak's rookie year, he's seemingly been on a downward spiral. This is extremely concerning because, there are guys that peak in their first or second year and then progressively spiral out. Dak could be one of these players. Dak could also be a player who's just had a couple of down years and is going to blow the doors open next year and be an elite quarterback for the foreseeable future. We don't have a definitive answer, and the fact is, Dak should be franchise tagged given his performance last year and the changes that have been made to the Cowboys front office during the offseason. Look, it's incredibly sad. Dak put himself in an incredibly vulnerable spot where he not only has a chance to lose out on millions of dollars, but he could also be out of a job by 2021. And I think that assuming the downward trend continues, Dak will likely look back on his decision to turn down the original offer from Jerry Jones with substantial amounts of regret. Now, would another team sign Dak if the Cowboys did get rid of him? Almost certainly, but would they sign him to a deal that's even close to what the Cowboys have already offered him? Probably not. What we now have to ask, though, is seeing as Dak made the choice to bet on himself rather than taking the secure route, is what happens if the Cowboys flop next year? Could Jerry Jones go crazy mode, get rid of Dak, and try to draft a guy like Trevor Lawrence, or probably a more realistic option in Justin Fields, or maybe one of the top QBs in the league hits free agency and Jerry Jones goes out to secure that quarterback? And then what will happen to Dak? Where will he go? Would he be seen as a long-term solution to a team immediately upon entering the building, or would he go from one hot seat to another? There's so many little variables that have been introduced to this whole equation, and what I have to ask you is, what do you think will happen to Dak Prescott?